Good evening. Good evening and welcome to the Emmanuel Centre for this very special How To Academy event. It's a real delight to see so many of you here for a very prestigious and exciting occasion. Tonight's guest doesn't really need an introduction. Consummate joker, rockstar, philosopher, film star. He is, of course, Slavoj Žižek. And yeah, you can clap that, that's fine. And we are absolutely delighted to have him with us as he celebrates his 75th birthday. So I hope you'll join me in celebrating with him. And we're looking forward to this conversation. It's hosted by Ash Sarkar. So please give them both a huge welcome as they come onto the stage.
So Slavoj just told me a secret when we were waiting in the wings. He said that he actually hates celebrating his birthday. Is that true?
No, I deny it. I was never born. I was like Buddha. I crawled out of the woman's body and already spoke some wisdoms, so.
I think you hatched under a moist rock fully formed. That was my sense, sort of like an amoeba.
No. You know what I compare myself to? My favorite detective writer, Patricia Highsmith. Mm-hmm. There is something miraculous about her. Her first stories are already fully perfect. It's incredible. There is no development. I don't believe in development. Okay.
So, the first job I ever wanted when I was a child was to be a burglar. I wanted to wear a stripy top, I wanted to break into people's houses, and that's how I wanted to make my living. What was the first job you ever wanted?
It may surprise you. I've even already spoke about it, but it's a movie director. In my teens, I read a lot of cinema theory, which was strangely translated into Yugoslavia at that point. And I read a lot of André Bazin, Eisenstein, all those great names. And then it was very sad. The more that I studied it, the more I discovered that I'm too stupid for it. So the desire that I still have, a little bit of it now, is to stage a big Wagner opera. It didn't work, but I already had contact at Bayreuth even. I collaborated, but just writing some text on a staging there. But the problem is that I would have to co-direct an opera because I don't have the patience to work with singers, But I think I have a very good idea for, I hope I'm not speaking totally strange language here, that you know vaguely the story of Parsifal, the Grail, king is dying, and so on. Then there is the bad guy Klingsor who has a ring of. My idea is to stage it in a modern mega city where Grail community is, of course, a gang which distributes drug. When they say distribute the Grail, it's drug, and Klingsor, the other guy, holds a prostitute ring, and he wants to take over the drug dealing, and in the end, when Parsifal wins, if you are a Wagnerian, his reveal the Grail means free drugs, no longer commercialization, and so on. And I was in contact already, but it didn't work. If you ask me, this is my secret desire.
Your secret desire?
To stage a big Wagner opera.
You still got time, man.
No, because as you were kind to remember the people, I'm 75,
Your new book is called Christian Atheism. Now, of course, one of the first things Marx says is that in order to criticize society, you must first criticize religion. that man must orbit himself like his own sun. He must give up any commitment to the world of spirituality, idealism, that that's a necessary condition for being a political actor. What was wrong with Marx? Why didn't you just stick with him?
Okay. I like this, that we don't go into this, what do I think about Gaza and Ukraine or what. I like that we will have, at least at the beginning, some time for also these eternal questions. You know, with Marx already, I will try to be as brief as possible, things are much more ambiguous. As some very good economists, I will name you names, for example, David Harvey, maybe the best interpreter of Marx today, of Capital. Sorry if I go into this more serious stuff, but he is behind this. You know what goes on now in readers of Marx, in humanities? Let's be frank. Till 10, 15 years ago, when Marxists, especially Frankfurt School tradition, when they referred to Marx, they really meant that introduction to Grundrisse, first chapter, and maybe a little bit of fifth chapter of Capital. They didn't really use it as a tool to analyze economy today. Now, if you want to be in, you must say volume 2 of Capital, which is about circulation, all the obstacles to free circulation, and that's it. So, but, you know, the best known part of Capital is that appendix to chapter 1 on commodity fetishism. And you discover something which I think today is more actual than ever. Just really give Marx a chance, read him. He is not saying economy works like that in reality, but we are caught in fetishist illusions. He says the exact opposite. He says, you know, the first sentence of that subchapter is, a commodity may appear a simple thing, but a close analysis of it reveals that it's full of theological tricks and so on and so on. So what Marx is saying is that if you are an everyday member of capitalist society, you think, what's the mystery? Money, commodity is just a thing I sell, I buy. No mystery. The mystery, fetishism, is in our social activity. It is how we act. On market exchange, it's there that we follow fetishism. You know why this is so important? Because today we are mostly cynics. We don't take things seriously. We think we are brutal enlightened. And the trick is no longer the old one. You have a religiously crazy guy and then you try to convince him about reality. No, at least in the Western countries, people are realists. And the trick is to demonstrate to them how deeply they are still caught in superstitions. To conclude, don't be afraid, let me repeat for, I think it's the 50th time, my favorite joke which shows this perfectly. Niels Bohr, Copenhagen, quantum physics, you know, he was also a philosophical genius. I'm sorry if most of you know this story. The rumor is that he was visited in his countryside by a friend scientist, and the scientist noticed a horseshoe at the entrance. And told him, wait a minute, I thought you were a scientist. This is superstition. I don't know how it's here, but in continental Europe, horseshoe above the entrance door allegedly prevents evil spirits. And you know what is Bohr's answer? I'm a scientist. Of course, I don't believe that it works. But I was told it works even if you don't believe in it. That's how ideology functions today. People participate in the ritual, although they don't believe in it.
One of the things that you say in the book is that it is better to say that God is stupid, God is cruel, God is mendacious, than it is to say God doesn't exist. So basically, are you saying that, look, you read the Bible, I'm not going to dispute the existence of God, I'm going to say he's a real bastard? Is that the point you're making?
You know why my answer is yes, although it's more complex? My answer is yes, because what I am afraid that, of course, it's the same cynicism. Today, most of the people, majority even, somebody told me a couple of days ago that in the last opinion poll, for the first time in history, Christians, less than half of the British people consider themselves Christian, believe in God. But I claim that at the level of how they act, you know, they still act as if they believe. In what sense? In the sense of, sorry for this quick jump to Lacanian theory, that there is some agency of a big other which measures, evaluate our acts. For example, the worst theology in this sense for me is the hardline Stalinism. It may appear totally godless, but no. All the time Stalinists say, you know, history will give us right. As if history is some virtual symbolic frame which at the end it will decide or reveal the truth about ourselves. And that classical Stalinist reply when you accuse them, but look what you are doing, killing millions per this is, wait, at the end history will give us right. So what I don't like about usual direct materialists is that they claim something like this. Yes, there is no God, but nonetheless, the Christian ideas are beautiful, so let's just stick to the ideas without God. And with all my respect for Jews, most of my Jewish friends practice the same approach, especially since many of them are now no longer my friends. They think from the river to the sea really holds for Israel. No, they're openly saying this now. From the river to the sea, it's ours. And so I asked them, do you believe in God? They said no, and they admitted there is no God, but God nonetheless gave us the land of Israel. You know, it's the same. It's incredible. So how this works, so that many people who proclaim themselves secular, at the level of how they act, their acts are still sustained by beliefs which they don't openly admit, but they practice this belief.
On the one hand, you've got the sort of secularization of politics. People don't like to talk about God, even if they act as though God is there.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, you've got a demographic trend, which is religious people, particularly in the UK, tend to have a lot more children than non-religious people do. Can this idea of a vaguely secular liberal democracy retain its core value, even as the demographics change?
But I'm not saying we need a new religion or whatever. I really think that the first step in getting things straight is not to play this predominant liberal game of, oh, Trump, horror, new fundamentalists. I agree with this. They are horror. And I think in some sense, Trump is even worse than the other bad guys like Putin, Xi of China, and so on. You know why? Because it's easy to maintain a distance towards them. You know, they are out there. But what Trump is doing now, you can check this in my text, which appeared, I think, on Politics Syndicate, on how we live in a very dangerous, I didn't lose my thread, don't be afraid, in a very...
No, you're just answering a different question than the one I asked, but it's interesting anyway.
That's called Marxism in practice, you know. Marxists never answer your question. No, what I want to say is that I'm really pretty desperate in politics because you know what happens now in Haiti. Gangs took over. Criminal gangs, practically the state. But why just Haiti? Let's go on to the top. Israel. aren't settlers not basically gangs violating the laws, but those who terrorize Palestinians of the West Bank, but nonetheless supported by the state? To go a step further, Proud Boys and other gangs which support Trump and so on. So I think that if Trump wins, we will really enter United States, but this will give signal to the world. Okay, not we will enter, but it will be a signal that, now I will talk with as an old hard-style Marxist, that the ruling system of our liberal democracy cannot even reproduce itself without tolerating or even relying on illegal gangs and so on. Again, you have Prigozhin, private army for Putin, you had Proud Boys, all that, you have settlers. And you know how the official power relates to them? They just silently tolerate them, use them, but they never openly appropriate them. So again, Trump is for me, now I'm coming to my point, immediately I will stop. What I don't buy is this liberal reproach of, yeah, Trump is a decadent phenomenon, horror, but, and that's my problem with Biden, but we act as if all we have to do is to return to good old welfare state social democracy. You know, Biden is all about it. It avoids the basic fact, which is that Trump is not ultimately, now we have to fight him, the true enemy. It is the weakness, the self-antagonisms of liberal, democratic, new corporate capitalism, which opened up the space for Trumpian populism.
You raised the point of armed settlers in Israel operating like a gang, and you said they're operating in violation of the law. And of course, technically, they're operating in violation of the law. The reality is that most armed settler attacks are never charged, are never prosecuted in Israel.
It's even
happening
worse.
in tandem with the state.
Not
right?
even this. It's even worse. Itamar Ben-Gvir, who was convicted in Israel 15 years ago as a terrorist by the state of Israel, is now what? It sounds like a bad joke. It's now Minister for National Security, who is giving it openly, gangs are in power.
Is that not the game of settler colonialism? You might compare it to the American West. You had gangs of armed cowboys displacing, murdering, humiliating indigenous people.
You know, there is even another thing, although I may disappoint you here. I do condone, reject Hamas attack. I think you cannot simply redeem it as maybe excessive, but nonetheless an act of armed resistance. But I agree with you, you know where? Miracle. I read many books on the Wild West, how it worked. You know that of, let's say, white settlers were in United States, mid-19th century, gradually penetrating the West. And it is true that sometimes men, mostly the Apache, Comanche, also others, counterattacked. They did cruel things, like burn a lone farm, blah, blah, blah. And this was used in exactly the same way as today Israel attacks Palestinians. You see this not only generally, like you see, you focus on this cruelty, it's even worse. You know that the one who really opened up the door to the West is the president who was in the mid-30s, General Jackson. Was it Henry Jackson? The first, and here we come to the tragedy. Jackson was the first populist president. He elevated, he almost generalized the right to vote, so that you don't have any illusions about the United States. All those first years, first decade, when it was Thomas Jefferson president and so on. But you know how many Americans, I mean those colonies in later, in the early decades of the United States, how many of the people voted? Between 1 and 1.5%. Only with Jackson we approached something close to our democracy, but at the same time, Jackson was the one who opened up, invade to the West, and now it's really an intriguing parallel with Israel. Do you know that he already used not the term, but the whole logic of humanitarian resettlement? He said the only way to save the, whatever you call them, Native Americans, Indians, I have a couple of Native American friends, they all prefer the term Indian. And this
They're not here to speak for themselves.
Sorry?
They're not here to confirm or deny what you've just said.
Yeah, but I heard this from them. You know why? They told me, very intelligent reasoning, sorry to repeat an old story. They told me, we Native Americans, what are you then? Cultural Americans. We are not part of nature. And then one of them told me, my old story, it happened 30 years ago in Missoula, Montana. One of them said, I much prefer to be called an Indian because in this case, my name is at least a symbol of the stupidity of white people who thought they are in India. No. Now I will go to slightly different direction to provoke you. Personally, I like so much talking with this truly excluded racially, blacks, native, whatever you call them, okay, Native Americans and so on, because they are so sensitive, not so much to outright racism as to this more subtle, patronizing, liberal white racism. For example, they hate it so much when, and it often happens to me, I'm like that, Mother God created me like this, I like to make vulgar remarks and so on, and then always, often liberals tell me, but wait, you cannot talk like this, you may hurt them, No, and then always my black or whatever friends say, sorry, we will tell him if we are hurt. Don't assume this role of as if we are half vulnerable children, idiots, and we have to be protected all the time. I am very good friends with some, Native Americans, blacks, and so on. And you know what is, I will not go into details, it would be too much for you, but you know what is the way I really become friends with them? We exchange racist insults all the way. Because, I think that without an opening for insults, we are in this respectful attitude, which is just self-terrorizing racism. The magic, you will not agree, I wanted to provoke you here.
Is there not a third option here, right? Because I agree with you. I hate this liberal politeness, infantilization, policing of language. I can't stand it because what it conceals
then there is a hope for you,
is a core of racism that as long as you're clever enough to not say it out loud, no one can condemn you, right? I can't stand it. But I don't buy that the only antidote to it is coarseness, vulgarity, and racist language.
Wait a minute. Let me now be more specific. This we have to do here, as Lenin would have put it, concrete analysis of concrete situation. There are dignified older people, of course, I wouldn't tell them, screw your mother or whatever, I'm not saying this. I'm just saying that it's my elementary experience to establish a true proximity to another beyond this polite exchange. There has to be a moment of, it can be gentle, relaxed vulgarity. But it doesn't always work. I'm the first to agree this with you. For example, if a lady was raped, something horrible and so on, I know you don't make vulgar jokes on that. You know, but now let me give you here the ultimate proof, and then I hope this will satisfy you. You know that it interests me, it was an old intrigue for me. Why are the few good movies about Holocaust comedies? From Life is Beautiful to Pasqualino Sette Bellezze, much better one. And then a Jewish friend explained it to me. He said that to mourn properly Holocaust, Jews themselves needed some time, 10, 15 years. It began like the greatest book, the absolute book, Primo Levi, If This Is a Man's Question. You know that for the first decade it was ignored. It's only in the late 50s. Why? Because, you know, it's the same lesson as I had with my son when he was young. If he falls down, cuts himself, the problem is not that he is crying. The moment he is crying, it's already relaxation. We are back to normal. The problem is that pure shock before. And it was something similar with, I by chance know only the analysis, a friend of mine who teaches in Stanford is doing it for Holocaust and for the famous Srebrenica massacre in Bosnia. You know how they survived? By making fun of themselves, by telling dirty jokes about themselves. It's in some sense, the point of these jokes is not, oh, it's just a joke. There is an admission that it's so traumatic that we are not yet able to fully confront it, to mourn it properly. It's a very interesting story. For example, the one whom I otherwise don't like so much, Elie Wiesel. Do I pronounce it correctly? The other who wrote memoirs of Eli like Wiesel, Y-A-E-S. Okay. He enumerates some of these wonderful theological jokes, or what happens in Bosnia, Srebrenica jokes, and so on. You know, jokes are very ambiguous things. Sometimes, when a situation is really terrible, tragedy is already a betrayal. Because tragedy means, let's say, I do something horrible to you. Tragedy means you still retain your dignity and are able to heroically, no, you can kill me, I will not. But when times are really, or places horrifying, like Holocaust, Gulag at a different level, you cannot play a tragic hero there. It's too desperate.
I want to move on to something that you talk about in the book, which is that you say that the left must fully assume the slogan of law and order. But of course, law and order isn't just a slogan, it's a series of practices.
Yeah.
So is what you're talking about that the left should better market itself using the language of law and order, or that we should get quite comfortable with the state using its full brutality against poor and abject people?
I totally see your point here. I just wanted to make or to render open the following insight. A guy with whom I was in a dialogue, and I don't agree with him politically, of course, although he's a relatively liberal Zionist, Yuval Harari, he said in a quite nice way, I think, that the strange thing that is happening in the last decade or so is that what before was the characteristic of the radical left, you know, like obscenity, shouting at representatives of power, a little bit of violence, and so on, that this is now more and more taken over by the new populist right. It's my old story. Maybe I repeat it even in this book, but you remember, what was it, 3 years ago, more, 6th of January, 21 inauguration. You know what happened there? Organized people, it was all a fake, but look at the appearance. Crowd of people invaded, broke into Capitol. My leftist friends were crying. They said, what is going on? We should be doing it, you know. I think that in this is a very sad fact. With the new populist right, The existing regime, as I said before, apropos criminal gangs, is violating brutally its own rules. So let me make my standard point clear. What do I mean by it? You know that Trump and his guys, if you listen to them, act as if they are strong moral majority, Christians, values, and so on. But look at how Trump acts. He is the ultimate postmodern cynical relativist. He tells dirty jokes, he's inconsistent, he relativizes. And what I'm tempted to say is that to oppose Bernie Sanders to Trump, if you look at how Bernie Sanders acts, isn't he, I know it's crazy what I will say now, a beautiful case of modest moral majority, decency of common people, and so on. So what I am claiming is that what if the left plays down a little bit this enjoyment in brutal demonstrations and so on, and more simply adopts the rule of, sorry, we are the true moral majority. You are dirty, violent criminals, and so on.
Does that not bring you into some kind of alignment with the rules-obsessed liberals that you were just decrying about 10 minutes ago?
No, because these liberals, no, if you mean by this rules-obsessed woke or rather cancel culture liberals, no, I have there one point.
Not just that, but the sort of people who, when Brexit was going on here, were saying, you can't do that, it's unlawful. And of course, Boris Johnson just did.
I see what I mean, but I'm now talking about something much more naive, even. I'm not talking about what you do here. I'm sorry, I'm an old leftist. I'm still a communist. I think that to seriously, and not a naive communist, there will be paradise, blah, blah, but communist in the simple sense that look at where our societies are going, with ecological crisis, with international relations, immigrants, with war threat, and so on. It's clear that the only thing that can save us, all of us, humanity, is somehow to step out from the nation state frame and a much stronger form of international collaboration, where I'm also not naive. I'm not saying socialized means of production, but I'm saying a much stronger social control of them. And I already see the beginning of them. The only thing that I liked about the pandemic is even people who are certainly not communists, like Boris Johnson and Trump, they even were forced to do some things like evoking an old law from Roosevelt time that the government can order directly industry what to produce, or giving, even under Trump, every family got a check of $2,000 and so on. Of course, then most of it went to large corporations. But I think it is clear, here I agree with Varoufakis, that capitalism as we knew it is coming to an end. I don't always agree with Varoufakis with his notion of anarcho-feudalism, but I see the phenomenon that he is trying to describe. Because look, people like, name them, Jack Bezos, Elon Musk, Bill Gates, these are no longer ordinary capitalists. They control a whole sphere of what, in the tradition of Marx, I call commons. The commons, for example, of book distribution, blah, 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 it's Bezos. I heard from my publishers again and again that my type of humanities books, 60 to 70% are sold through Amazon. If Amazon wants, they can destroy you. So again, what I'm saying is that something new is emerging, here I agree with Varoufakis, which is potentially even worse than capitalism, because the traditional capitalism, it was possible to regulate it, to control it through welfare state mechanisms. This no longer works. The next thing that is important here is, who is today potentially the subject of radical change, of emancipation? I think it's no longer automatically whatever remains of the old working class. We have precarious workers. We have what is, from the standpoint of market, of money exchange, the invisible work. Like my good friend, I say this sincerely, I'm proud to know him, Alvaro Garcia Linera, the ex-vice president of Bolivia. He told me that's what they got there. It's not just the working class, they are even up to a point slightly privileged. You have a permanent job, retirement money, health care. What about, especially in Bolivia, I was told, thousands of women hired illegally with no official registration to do the dirty housework, to do the harvest and so on. So we have this entire sphere. Then we can even talk, other friends of mine, some friends in Denmark, developed the notion of ecological exploitation. For example, if in north of Canada, although at some point people were praising Trudeau, but the problem was that when they did, how do you call solely fracking, this new procedure of extracting oil? No? Fracking,
yeah,
I think.
I mean, the thing that I was, that struck me as you were talking is not just about who are the working class and what do they constitute and how do you organize them, but also what are choke points in capitalism.
Sorry, what?
What are choke points in global capitalism? Choke points where all goods have to flow, and if you interrupt that flow of goods, you strategically have a very strong position. Are the Houthis not showing communists how it's done?
Hutus, you mean those in south
In the
of
Red
Yemen?
Sea.
I have problems with them because for me it's always important when you do such things. I always think in the terms, I may be wrong, of potential universalization. And I don't see that potential. If we talk about things like this, my ideal, if there is a thing in the last years which really gave me hope, it was, I forgot the lady's name, I'm so sorry, that Kurdish student, Mahsa, who was killed in Iran. And then this was something wonderful. That was for me true feminism. Not these cancel culture struggles, but tens of thousands, ordinary people in Iran identified with her fight. It became a common denominator of the entire social dissatisfaction.
Is it maybe also not the case that that's something which is extremely palatable to the West because it's in line with our values, and it just, it's a cause which I think of as very, very just. But the Houthis are, of course, Islamists. They've got incredibly regressive ideas around LGBT rights and women. But when it comes to the tactic of interrupting trade through the Red Sea, of forcing trade to go around the Cape of Good Hope, there's a reason why they're loathed by the West, and it's not just for their ideas, it's because they found a tactic that works.
Yeah, but do you think the effect will be felt mostly by ordinary people in the West? I claim they will be much more hurt. And that's what worries me there. For me, I don't believe that the struggle goes today along the lines of the developed West, where there is no longer working class, as some of my leftist friends are telling me. The West is totally corrupted. It's all what Lenin called workers' aristocracy, and our only hope are third world immigrants, and so on and so on. I respectfully disagree with this, because as David Harvey, my Marxist American friend, the ultimate economist today, told me, first, do you know in the 2008 crisis, what enormous destruction this crisis caused in small, half-abandoned American cities and so on and so on. And the left ignored that chance, and then, paradoxically, Trump got those votes. The second thing, I'm not saying we should directly export our values to the third world, our notion of human rights and so on and so on. I agree with you here. But when you mention that Hutus, nonetheless, they are the hardline Islamists, not LGBT, but aren't here they an example of something that worries me? You probably must know what is going now, not only in Uganda, but also in some other African countries. They are radicalizing the legislation against gay people, homosexuality, justifying it in the terms of resisting Western colonialism. In Uganda, I followed it closely. They have now a new law where if you are caught in homosexual act, it can be either life imprisonment or death penalty. And I did something that not many journalists did. I went to look at their newspapers. It was all about that's our resistance to colonialism. So there is a limit here for me in the sense of I'm afraid to draw this conclusion. The main thing is to fight against Western capitalism. So let's forget about how they treat women and so on. No, I'm not ready to do this.
Let's go to a Q&A, but after this talk, we're going to have a conversation about tactics.
Sorry, you seriously disappointed me now because I thought you will counterattack. You know what I mean? Like, I think if you ask me, this is a serious problem. On the one hand...
All right. If you want me to counterattack, I'll counterattack. One.
Yeah, you see, that's what...
I'm so easily goaded. One, a lot of the anti-LGBT legislation which is being passed in Africa...
Don't tell me it's because
elsewhere.
Baptists are influential.
No, that is one strong element, which is a lot of this is being funded from churches which operate in America and in Europe. The liberal consensus around LGBT rights in Europe and in America is very strong. There's, of course, a massive glaring exception around trans people, but where you're able to, I think, connect this deeply violent homophobic project, and it's also one which is about rolling back the clock on women's rights and also preventing women's rights from being established, you can combine that with a sort of crude caricature of anti-colonialism, and it will work. It's a strategy which has worked for Western churches to operate in Africa. What I'm talking about with the Houthis isn't are they goodies or are they baddies. What I'm saying is that have they identified a tactic that leftists should be learning from? So don't look at organizing your own workplace. Like, I'm sorry, it's maybe not that strategically effective to organize in whatever NGOs we all work in here. Maybe it is much more effective to, hijack an oil tanker. That's something which can bring global capital to its knees. Introducing a 4-day week in your particular corner of the charity sector isn't. And that's the thing I'm talking about.
But
I do want to go to a Q&A.
But again, here also we should be realists in the sense that do you think that what Hutus are doing there has a universal potential in the sense that workers in the West or even in other third world countries will say, oh my God, aren't they really doing something that we should have been doing, interrupting the flow and so on and so on. I am just skeptical there. I'm here a Hegelian. Hegel is not a stupid idealist who thinks, oh, somehow the good side will always win. No, Hegel, that's why I'm a Hegelian today, is always a guy who, when a good idea comes, his question is, how can things go wrong with even the best, idea? And here, again, my opposition to Hutus is not moral. I even had a sympathy so that I will hopefully convince you that I'm not bluffing. I even had a sympathy with Somali pirates, The idea was, Islamist fanatics robbing sheep there. Yeah, but what people, most of the people, didn't mention is that what drove the Somalian Somalis to such a despair. Big international countries with their fishing, gigantic fishing, they depleted the sea there. They totally ruined the way they got most of the food. And it was just a very desperate act to try to begin to attack. But now I will strike back, if I may, at this level with, you know, what was a singular, most depressive experience that I had in the last year. The last summer where I work at Birkbeck School, we had two ladies, wonderful ladies, my God, this sounds male chauvinist, I know, from South Africa, ANC, old fighters, stop. And I asked one of these ladies, listen, let's be frank. I read all the bullshit about South Africa, a failed state, and so on. Tell me, what should be my reply to people who are well-meaning, they are not openly racist, but nonetheless see this. And she told me very honestly something that almost made me cry. She told me, you know what is now among the poor blacks in South Africa, more and more the predominant experience of life. It made me cry, the nostalgia for apartheid. Because she told me, listen, the standard of living for black majority is no better than under apartheid, maybe in some parts with new unemployment even worse, while South Africa was a police state, which nonetheless meant it was some basic safety. Now, it's violence. All that really happened in South Africa is that the old white ruling class is joined by a new black ruling class. And you see, these are, for me, the tragedy of Africa. Because then, of course, you feed the white liberals who they are proud to say, look, give me one example where blacks took over and they didn't screw up the economy and so on. I'm very realist here. The same, another provocation to you. Fuck them, their Q&A.
No, they really...
No, please. No, just one thing. You know what's also my problem? Don't misunderstand me. When I criticize, for many people in a too brutal way, cancel culture and all that, my point is not they are too radical. No, their radicalism is for me a fake one. For example, as a Hegelian, here enters the notion of concrete universality. I only think when you have an ideological trend, it's crucial to identify what concrete image of or case, how should I put it, exemplifies this. You know, for example, you remember John Major. You don't remember him too well, but...
I was 5 years old when John Major was ousted from government. I
envy you. Why is this a just world where you were 5 and I was already over 50 at that point? No, it's not the right... But okay, what I wanted to say is that they admitted social crisis, but it was incredible operation, purely symbolic, easy to understand for a Lacanian. Maybe if you are some of you old enough here, they elevated a single unemployed mother into the symbol of all evil.
It was the Back to Basics campaign.
Yeah. They said drugs, because single unemployed mothers, they do this. Violence against children, violent children, because single... She was the symbol. And in a similar way, what I didn't like, at least in how Me Too functioned a couple of years ago, it was that the typical scene was always men putting pressure on a woman, and yes means yes, like, is there a pressure, is she allowed to reject the advances, and so on. First, I didn't like here to paint a woman as just defending herself and so on. Second, more important thing, but isn't it, you know where people understand? I was in Mexico City at some point there and met feminists, Mexican feminists whom I love. They gave me a simple example which possesses me. They told me, okay, your American examples, a half-failed actress, a producer tells her, you go with me to bed. Okay, it's sad, but can you even compare it with what? With this. Imagine you are, not you, a symbolic you. You are a lower-class woman, mid-30s, with 2-3 children, without a job, your husband sustains you, and you are, sorry for this male chauvinist phrase, you are losing, at least in the men's or your sexual attraction, and even if the husband is not beating you or what, you are ignored, you have absolutely no chance to leave him to survive alone. Isn't this a terrifying, hopeless life? I would approach the problems in this way. How does real feminine everyday suffering work?
Where I agree with you is that I think much of what we call identity politics today focuses on the most economically and politically privileged people who may also be black, brown, trans, female, whatever, and focuses on their experience and doesn't focus on the experience of people who are also economically abjected. I agree with you there. But if we're going to talk about cancel culture, a very simple rule of thumb that which I get from Marx, and I always try and apply whatever I'm doing, is I always remember to myself, conditions shape consciousness. So let's think about your conditions. You're a man, you're an older man, and what's more, you make your money by having opinions. You have those opinions and people yell at you. So no wonder you're incensed and you're wound up by cancel culture. That's a product of your conditions.
No, wait a minute. First, cancel culture is now changing because there is, in Germany at least, and I hope you will disagree with it, a new form of cancel culture when if you just say Palestinians are also suffering, you are anti-Semitic. And this is also,
But it does not reduce it to call it cancel culture, because then what you do is you create an equivalence between a project which is from the state, from the media, from organized lobby groups, and you equate that to someone on Twitter calling you a twat. There's a problem here of equivalence.
Yes, but when you describe me the way you described me, nonetheless, I think I can defend myself in this way. People don't notice it. Let me make a couple of references to my public status here in the United States. You with your, I was 5 years old at that age. You probably don't remember it, but some of you, do you remember times 20 years ago when I was regularly publishing columns in New York Times even, and here in The Guardian? Then it began 10 years or so ago. Now, the only guys, I don't know how it came to this, that occasionally publish me, mostly just on the web, not in printed text, are the New Statements and sometimes Spectator. But and it goes to both poles. Guardian, I'm prohibited. Let's be open. New Left Review, London Review of Books, I am out. So I did pay quite a considerable price. I practically disappeared from public space. That's why I desperately had to do all those horrible things, Substack and other.
You also have a book published by Bloomsbury that you're selling now.
Yeah. No, books still.
If that's disappearing from the public sphere, then a lot of people would say it's pretty good.
Okay, but what I'm saying is that, of course, you still have a certain amount of freedom here, because what is a book? To be brutal, if it will sell more than 3,000, it will be a success. This is how our societies work, you know. It's not open censorship. It's that in a subtle way you are cancelled. But again, my point with cancel culture is that I like more direct rules. What I don't like in cancel culture is first how you do something and you are never sure will you be cancelled and not. The second thing, the most basic one, I say this to annoy you, you will not agree with me.
I've really got to go to the Q&A. You can't annoy me too much.
Sorry?
I've got to open it out so these lovely people can ask questions.
Wait a minute. Don't you disappoint me. I will suspect that in spite of your Hutu stuff, you are really deep in yourself a filthy liberal. That you believe in, look, we here, I'm a Stalinist. We know better than people what people really want. So let's go on and, you know.
All right, one sec.
Very seriously. Sorry,
Quick show of hands. Who really wants a Q&A?
No, but Siri,
Who wants this to keep going?
No.
There we go.
One sentence, just. You know what's my problem with cancel culture? The official line is they fight for diversity and inclusion. But what they effectively do is mostly excluding everybody that they perceive as too diverse from the doxa. Now, I am totally against prohibiting racism and so on, but I would just draw on another thing. What I so often find lacking in cancel culture is that the more they appear fanatical and so on, the more it's not clear, except for some abstract justice and so on, where is their program? What are they fighting for? See, I'm even more for Hutus than for them.
See, this is where I think you're the filthy liberal.
Oh my God.
Because
that's the end. I will pay some agents when you leave home today. The people will ask tomorrow who has seen you last alive. Please. No, please tell me.
This is why you're the filthy liberal, because I'd go further than you, right? What does Marx say about the political project in front of us? It is to create a movement of the majority for the majority. That's the project of communism, right? That's the project of working class action.
Now we come to a real difference,
right.
But we still... Sorry.
If it's a movement of the majority for the majority, by definition, that's going to include racists, transphobes, homophobes, sexists. And if I turn my back on those people, all I have left is a particularly disempowered form of elite politics, where all I can do is speak for a self-selecting group.
I see this as a critique of cancel culture.
It is. I have a critique of cancel culture, but I also have a critique of people who occupy high social status jobs, who are paid for those high social status jobs pretty well,
I'm not
who
one
identify
of those. No, can I clearly
identify themselves as victims when their readership doesn't like what they're saying. That's my problem with
I never
the cancel
claimed that I
culture
was a
discourse.
victim, and let me tell you a paradox, which I repeat all the time. It's much more paradoxical. You know what's the key to my success relative? Not, I'm a bright guy and I survived the oppression. The right oppression at the right point. When I finished my postgraduate studies in '73, this was then the last Indian summer of hardline communism. And although I already filled out the forums, all of a sudden I was excluded as not being Marxist enough. Then I was for 6-7 years unemployed. And then I was given an extremely marginal job in Yugoslavia, as in many soft communist countries. Those who were considered intelligent but too dangerous to be allowed to teach at the university, they were given marginal research jobs. That's it. Because it was, in some sense, a pure sinecure, but the result of oppression. Because I wasn't allowed to teach, and I got all the freedom, pure researcher. Yugoslavia was open at that level. I traveled abroad. So again, that's my paradox. Without the lust big wave of communist oppression. You know what I would have been? A stupid professor in a shithole of a city called Ljubljana there in Slovenia. So literally, this was the key. This was my luck. You know, that it was oppression, but not too harsh an oppression, and an oppression which just opened up the space for me to establish connections abroad. I did then my doctor's thesis in Paris. I became friendly, although later we split with Ernesto Laclau and so on. And okay, this is private boasting. You will not say anything, but you know that I have, this is very dangerous what I will say there, because it can also be the worst patronizing attitude of the upper class people. But as general rule, I hate these pretentious mid-level theorists who speak their jargon and so on. I immediately establish friendship with whatever I meet of the ordinary people, those who work in the stores, taxi drivers in Slovenia, and so on and so on. So my idea is not even to be rich. My idea is, you know what? Now you will laugh. If you ask me my ideal way of life, Gulag with a human face. That is to say, what I take from Gulag is your life is organized, they awaken you, now you wash, now this, and then you read and write, do what you want. I'm not interested in other things, you know. But okay, let's play democracy now, if you want.
Thing is that we've only got 3 minutes left, so
What?
I don't think.
What? Really? Was I so long?
Yeah. So
No, you are not a good. You didn't. Now I will. No. Now I will be really evil. Are you not civilized enough to know what does it mean a rhetorical question? When I said, was I too long? I expected you to say, no, but it was wonderful and so on. And you simply said, yes, you were. My God, where is the United Kingdom going?
As a journalist, I have an absolute duty to the truth, I'm sorry.
Sorry?
As a journalist, I have an absolute duty to the truth.
Are you really a good journalist? The
No.
last joke. You know how I define a good journalist? Let's say we do an interview and you then transcribe it and publish it, no? Every idiotic average journalist is able, of course, to transcribe it and render what I wanted to say. A really good journalist uses only my words, but manipulates them in such a way that it makes me say the exact opposite of what I wanted to say. Can you do this?
I think you do a really good job of saying the opposite thing to what you mean by yourself. And you don't need my help.
You know, I have an idea that when we men are evil, we are evil in a rather primitive, brutal way, but that women like you have a way to be evil, which is nice, you smile, but it hits much more, you know. So in this sense, I'm a feminist. We need more women than you.
So, we do actually have one last surprise for you.
Not birthday. I will kill you. I will kill your mother.
I'll give you her address when this is over so you can send the friendly bullet her way, but please.
Oh my God. Oh my God. I wish this would work the way it should, that 2 candles means that I'm 2 years old. No, but should I blow it?
No, it's a real fire. We'll just watch it.
Why 2 candles or whatever?
I wasn't sure that they were both going to work.
Ah, that's, yeah. Oh my God. But you know what the message of birthday for me is? 75, like I should do when I return in 2 days to Ljubljana is look for the price, where are the cheapest, the best grapes, and so on, you know. I'm already at that level, you know. But I hope you will agree with me in something else. I'm not afraid of death. I'm afraid of a painful... No. I'm not pathetic. I'm afraid of painful process of dying.
Yeah, that's
For
fair
example,
enough.
I spoke once openly with my sons, and they tried to blackmail me with this stupidity. You know, how would you react if one of us dies? And I told them the truth. I would immediately ask, how did you die? Not you, but others, no? I say, if it's an instant death, I would say, okay, Seth, let's go on to a movie or whatever. If I would have learned that they slowly suffered and so on, I'm not sure I would survive, you know. For me, the ideal death would have been, but it doesn't work, that I would have a doctor, medical friend, who would judge when I'm getting too old, senile, and silently poison me in a painless way, and he will not tell me when. It wouldn't work, because I would know who this doctor is, and I will always look at him with anxiety. But wouldn't you like to die like that?
My dream of death is that I will be surrounded by my loved ones, gliding away on a cloud of oxycodone and propofol.
But I see your point, but you will know that you are dying.
Well, I think with all the oxycodone, I won't mind.
Yeah. No. You know who died very happily like that? And let's conclude this if we are here among theorists. I don't appreciate too much, but Hannah Arendt. I spoke with the guy who was there at her side. It was a reception at her apartment. They were talking, she was a little bit tired. On her fauteuil, he said, okay. She said, I will just take a short nap. In 5 minutes, she was awakened, debated a little bit, again a short nap. And then the 5th time, it was a short nap, and she didn't awaken.
And then it was a longer nap.
Yeah, forever, yeah. But she wasn't aware, nobody, isn't this as close as you can get?
On that note of a very long nap, thank you all so much for coming.
So no democracy. No democracy.
No democracy. No
Thank you.
democracy.
Thank you.